All right, all right. All I got to do is hear that little and I know exactly what song that is. How are you?
Yeah.
Mojo Monday.
Mojo Monday, Brett. And by the way, I bet you cannot name another Survivor song.
No, probably not. And I'm not even sure I know it's Survivor that sings that song. We just
Well,
know it
that's
as Eye of the Tiger by Rocky.
not by Rocky. It's Survivor.
I'm kidding.
That song has allowed them to survive in history.
There you go. Well, here's the deal. Underdog. That's really what we wanted to talk about today for our Mojo Monday. I mean, we had a pretty cool opportunity to observe an underdog a week and a half ago, and we're going to talk about that. And yet, Rocky tends to be one of those classic underdog tales of the stories of time, right? But Rick, I mean, here we are on Mojo Monday, and we said, let's talk about the underdog. Set me up. What's underdog? What does that mean?
Underdog's the unexpected competitor that shows up in the ring or on the track or any forum where there's competition that's just unexpectedly there, for starters. And then the real story of the underdog is when they somehow pull out an unexpected victory and beat the expected champion who's always won, will always win, that looks like a champion, speaks like a champion. And I think there's a real relatability to, especially in American culture, where we tend to root for the underdog.
Oh yeah, and as you're sitting here describing that, it makes me think, like, no matter who you are, at some point in time, you had to go through the underdog phase. You didn't just show up day one a champion or a favorite.
Yeah.
And you were the underdog every other moment prior to that, right?
Yeah, unless you're born into royalty or
Yeah.
But that's like one in a bazillion. But you're right. We all woke up with lacking skills, lacking capacity, and often lacking self-confidence. And that comes only with getting in the ring and getting pummeled and proving yourself right by getting up again.
Yeah. And one of the things that I admire is when, by most definitions, we observe people that we would consider a favorite or a champion, but when you hear an interview or you talk to them, they see themselves as still an underdog.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. And that's that mentality or that mindset that I think we're going to try to capture in this conversation this morning, right? So why don't you kick us off?
Well, I mean, so the first step is recognizing that, you want something and being inspired by the idea of succeeding where maybe the rest of the world tells you you can't, or history hasn't proven it true yet. And, and again, back to the relatability. I mean, we've talked about Coach Carter and some amazing movies, Remember the Titans and of course, Rocky. I mean, what a great story. There's very few movies made about people who were born blessed and then just do what they're expected to do. So it's about doing things that are extraordinary or unexpected. And, so the first step is recognizing that you have the power and capacity inside yourself, and then recognizing the work required to potentially achieve that.
Yeah. You can talk movies all day long. Hoosiers was one of my first ones, right? And I remember the scene in the movie when he takes his team, who by any definition shouldn't have been in that game, right? And he takes them out on the court and says, let's measure how tall the basketball hoop is. Let's measure the court. Oh, it's the same court we've always been playing on. It's a mind game, right? Like, you have to get your head geared up as an underdog to perform at your best, right? It's a mentality. And you talked about Cinderella, and I was going to make fun of you if you brought up the Cinderella story, but at the end of the day, Cinderella is one of the greatest underdog stories, right?
Not expected for sure. Definitely not the favorite. And
yeah,
but when the underdog wins, we all cheer loudly, and it creates emotional energy. I think that's part of it too. When you're expected to win and you win, it's not as emotional, and the emotion is the energy that pushes, drives, and fuels life.
Yeah. So if I'm kind of putting some context around this, to me, as an underdog, you have to see yourself as an underdog first, right? And then you create, you create that mindset around that. But that means you got to be looking up at something. So obviously in real estate, which a lot of our listeners come from, you can kind of see who the agents that are more successful, the teams that are more successful, the people that have bigger portfolios of wealth building. It's pretty easy to kind of identify the people that you're looking up to going, hey, I want to become them someday. And then the underdog is that energy, that fight that says, hey, I'm going to go take that climb. I'm going to go climb that ladder. I'm going to go climb that staircase to success. And how I approach that journey has everything to do with how I think of myself as an underdog.
Agreed. And underdogs tend to work harder. They try harder. They show up earlier. They stay later. I mean, and one thing I would caution listeners to be careful of is when you look at that North Star, that person that's occupying the space you one day want, it's easy to assume based on, you judge your insides by their outsides that somehow they, were born on second or third base and didn't have to pick up a bat and learn how to hold it. They had a journey of their own. And so, it's smart to go find those people and listen to their journey and how they did it, because steps 1, 2, and 3 are almost more important than 6, 7, and 8, which might be the finish line experience that puts you in a position that you look like the favorite.
Yeah. So speaking of the finish line, we just had the Kentucky Derby, right? This horse, Rich Strike, won the Kentucky Derby. But if you didn't know the backstory, you'd be looking at this horse thinking it was the favorite. But there's some interesting facts, like this horse had 80-1 odds to win that race, Rick. And there's only one other horse in history that won the Kentucky Derby with worse odds. So by all definition, it was the underdog in that race, right?
Absolutely.
And, Eric Reed is his trainer, and we're going to talk about the trainer, but the trainer had never even had a horse in the Kentucky Derby before this horse. And that trainer, not even 4 or 5 years ago, had a massive fire in a barn that housed all his horses, and they were all killed in this fire. So major tragedy. He almost was out of the game, recovered, trained a new horse, and he's got his own story, right? The horse has a story. The trainer's now got a story. Then you take this jockey. The jockey's never even ridden a horse in the Derby before. This is the first time he rode in the Kentucky Derby. So he's got an underdog story. Then, this horse in its entire history had only won one other race previous to the Kentucky Derby. And that was almost a year prior in September 2021. So now this horse has an underdog story. The jockey has an underdog story. The trainer, the owner, all these people come together. And it kind of throws context to a team, right? The team performed as an underdog, but everybody individually inside that team had that mentality as well. And at the end of the day, they won the Kentucky Derby. And I just think it's a cool little story to throw context to our conversation.
Well, and it is miraculous, but you know where it all started? It starts in when that horse was born, someone decided it had potential and it had an opportunity to be something. And then they groomed and grew it in the direction of being a racehorse. Horses do lots of things. There's roping horses, there's cattle horses, there's horses that pull buggies. And, the fact is they knew that was a racehorse. So recognizing your gold medal skill is really a big step towards living into that underdog that becomes a dominant champion one day. And the part they don't talk about, too, is the hours of training that probably I'm certain that occurred in the wee hours of the early morning and the late night prepping that horse. But then when you're prepared and you're ready and you show up for the race, things had to happen. I mean, the odds that I think there was a horse that was withdrawn the day of or that morning that allowed them to even be in the race. But if they hadn't done all the work to prepare for that moment, it would have been irrelevant. Someone else, another horse would have been next up and next in line. So, how do you position so that you're ready when you're next up and your name's called, you step up and do your part? And then during the race, Brett, you watch the race evolve. I was laughing at myself when we kind of discussed the context of this whole underdog. And I picked number 4 because it's my favorite number. My wife and I grabbed a glass of wine 10 minutes before I was doing, some work around the house. And she said, "Hey, the Derby's coming on. Let's watch," which we love to do. And, we picked a horse. I didn't do any research. I certainly didn't pick Rich Strike at 80-1. I mean, that would be a foolish. Who bets on that horse, right? And the answer is somebody did, and the trainer and the jockey did, for sure. But number 4 got the jump, and for the first quarter of the race was in first place. And I thought, look at me, I'm brilliant at my picking game. And then that horse faded. It didn't take long before I think it might have finished, bottom third. And Ridge Strike started in the bottom quartile. It was like 4 or 5 from the back in the first quarter of the race, maybe even third. And then it methodically started chipping away. And then, I'm convinced when it reached the last turn that the universe favored that horse, and it was just its day. And then when it was against the rail, there were 2 or 3 horses, 2 stacked right in front of him on the rail. And then there were the 3 front runners in front of that. So they were running 6, or he was running 6 or 7. And then all of a sudden, for some, I would say unknown, the 2 horses on the right, and I'm going to guess that they shifted right because they realized they weren't going to get around the front 3 without going outside, which opened the door. And man, I don't know where that horse found turbo speed, but it went super jet stream and blew through those 2, and then found a gap between the next 2 and just ran away with it.
Yep.
But it was exhilarating.
There's so many lessons in what you just said. Like, how does the underdog approach preparation? Are you ready when your name gets called? You have to prepare and be ready. And a wise person once said to me, you show up and do your best every day. At some point in time, somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder.
That's it.
And they got the tap, and they got the slot in the Kentucky Derby. And then opportunity shows up in life. 1, you have to be able to recognize it. And 2, you got to have enough gas in the tank to take advantage of it when it shows up. Right. And you said it was the universe. I'll call it opportunity, whatever you want to call it. There was a moment in time where if that horse didn't have the energy to blow through that opening, it wouldn't have run the Kentucky Derby, and we wouldn't be talking about it today, Rick Hale.
No, we wouldn't. But I love the interview at the end, Brett, where and it's fun to me when it wasn't just about the jockey, it wasn't just about the trainer, and it wasn't even just about the owner, but all 3 were part of a team in their lane doing what they did. One funded it, one trained it, one rode it. And without each of those having their best day ever, it wouldn't have happened, or their experiential best proverbial day. And I love that, the trainer, it's obvious the amount of work he put in for the day that the jockey hopped on it and made it happen and prepared that horse for the jockey. And the jockey was a perfect match on that given day. But I particularly, the owner, it was interesting watching him just, fall to tears, and he couldn't even speak and tell you the emotional energy. And then, the other fellow, they asked him, like, did you think he could win? And the answer was, we wouldn't put a horse in the race we didn't think could win. But the reality is, I don't think he knew that they would win. He just was positioned for the opportunity and then seized it. And so how does that convey in your life? That's the question of the day. What opportunity could you seize if it presented because you're ready, that changes because of the mindset of preparation?
Man, there's so many, but I guess that's the application for our listeners, right? What is that?
Yeah. What's your gold medal skill, and how do you refine it to the extent that when your moment shows up, you're the undeniable choice or champion of the future?
There you go. So, Rick, we have a mantra for the underdog, right? And before I get to that, I want to end on that. I always try to figure out what's the application of what we're talking about here in Mojo. And I think from an underdog perspective, you have to recognize you're an underdog. And sometimes that means there's got to be something that's a favorite in front of you. And sometimes if you're a little competitive, or even if you're not that competitive, it creates some competitive energy inside of you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's energy, it's passion, it's that emotion that causes you to want to do better. And what I've learned in my life is that energy and that passion and that emotion is what keeps you in the game when it gets boring. It keeps you in the game in preparation. And when it's not game day, it's not exciting, nobody's watching, there's nobody in the stands, all that energy says, I'm going to win. I'm preparing for me because my mindset tells me I need to, and I need to get in and put in the work. And then really, I think from there is just understanding the fact that you are in an underdog position, you're looking up at something and harvesting that energy and passion, and then just go play, go prepare, be ready for it when it shows up, right?
That's it. Prepare like an underdog, fight like an underdog, and one day you'll be the victor. and I think it was Joe Frazier that said, when after winning a really big unexpected fight early in his career, they said, when did you know that you were going to win? And I think the expected answer would be somewhere in the fifth round. And instead he said it was in the deep recesses of the night when I was shadow boxing myself mentally and I was preparing. That's when I knew I had a shot at the title. And so
there you go.
There you go. So, and the other thought was, don't let the odds dictate your success story and your future. Figure out your gold medal skill and what you're really good at, and become so undeniably good that the world and the universe has to recognize you as the champion.
There you go. So, what's the mantra? We have a mantra for the underdog that I want to leave everybody with.
I think it's don't let the odds dictate your future, and then do the work, so that what you're great at becomes undeniably obvious.
Yeah. And if it was Rich Strike, if he had listened to the odds of 80-1, he would have finished in last place.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Favorite underdog story, and we're out. Go.
It's got to be.
Don't tell me
Strike.
Cinderella, Rick Hale.
I would probably say Rich Strike, man. 80-1. How could that not be your current favorite underdog story? I mean, otherwise I'm gonna have to go Bad News Bears.
There you go. I had the unique opportunity to meet this guy one time, and this is Rudy in real life. And if you look, I'm a big man, but he's a little bitty man. And if you know the story of Rudy, I just think it's one of the most amazing underdog stories of all time. Mojo Monday, my friend.
Mojo Monday. Hope everyone has an amazing week. Go find your gold medal gift and put it to work.
Love it.